Welcome friends to our channel of chilling tales and spine-tingling mysteries. Today, we have 3 hair-raising horror stories that will send shivers down your spines. So, grab your favorite blanket, turn down the lights, and enjoy. Growing up, I remember spending time exploring the cave system in the mountain, while my dad was herding the goats to fresh pastures. I have 8 siblings, and we all had our daily chores around the farm before we were allowed to go and play. My memory of that time of my life is quite hazy, but I do recall times that were pivotal and left a mark. My family was not poor, but we were comfortable. Our livestock and crops were thriving. My dad sold meat and vegetable to local restaurants and grocery stores. He had established a good relationship with them over the years, and the close-knit community supported each other through hard times. I remember being a very happy kid and a bit mischievous. One night, my dad woke all of us up, told us to grab whatever we could, and we needed to leave as soon as possible. My mom and older siblings were confused, but my dad looked so scared that they sprang into action without argument and started throwing stuff into bags. Within 10 minutes, we were out of the house, running into the forest behind the house. My dad was looking behind him at the road, and I could see a pair of lights approaching at speed. It was a vehicle, and it was upon us in a blink of an eye. My family were still running towards the forest, and we're in a clearing with nowhere to hide. 4 men dressed in black jumped out of the vehicle. They began running towards us. My dad breathlessly told us to keep running. I was the youngest at 6 years old, and my little legs would not go faster. My mom picked me up and gave the bag she was carrying to the others. The men chasing us warned they were going to shoot if we did not stop. We were already entering the forest when there were several shots fired. Everyone ducked and then scattered in all directions once we were inside the forest. Dad had said to do that once we were inside the forest. It was the only way to make sure they could not catch all of us. When I turned to look behind my mom as she carried me deeper into the forest, I saw my dad lying motionless on the ground and a pool of blood around his head. The men appeared next to my dad and fired a few shots at us. We were able to get away. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but I do remember that night. We knew the forest like the back of our hands, and Mom found a shelter where we could spend the night until morning. Even after 20 years, I can still remember the horror of that night. We stayed up all night, and at one point, we heard footsteps close by where we were hiding and heard a few gunshots throughout the night. We could not cry because we knew they were shooting at my brothers and sisters. My mom hugged me tightly and had her hand over my mouth to stop me from making any noise. I felt water running down my cheek, and when I looked up, tears were streaming down my mom's cheeks. Once it was safe for us to move again, we made our way to the closest village and to my dad's best friend, MK's house. He hid us in the shed, and shortly after 3 of my other siblings joined us as well. We had lost half of our family that night. Mom was inconsolable, and MK's wife sat with her that morning to give her comfort. MK had arranged transportation to take us out of the village and to safety. Years later, I got the courage to ask my mom about that night and why it had happened. I was a teenager, and I had a lot of questions about my ancestry, about my life, and most of all, why I lost my dad. She finally told me the truth. I never met my grandparents because Dad told us they died in a car accident. The truth was far more unbelievable. My grandfather was involved in illegal activities, and he took over from his father, and his father took over from his. In short, it was a family business. Grandpa was grooming both my dad and my uncle, let's call him Sam for now, to take over the family business when he retired. Life of crime had never been appealing to my dad, and when he met my mom, he decided to leave it all behind. He had cut all contacts with them, including with my uncle, Sam. A few years ago, Grandpa got in touch and informed Dad that Sam had passed away. Now, there was no one to take over the business, and that was unacceptable. He gave my dad an ultimatum to come back home or send him one of the kids to train. My dad refused and told him to accept his decision. That night, Dad got a call from Grandma, who warned him that Grandpa had sent men to come to the house. She said he had gone senile and irrational over the last few years. He had shot and killed Sam for insisting to have him interned in a psychiatric hospital for treatment. The doctors suspected dementia, but they needed to conduct further tests on Grandpa, who refused and insisted there was nothing wrong with him. He accused Uncle Sam of trying to get rid of him for the money. That night, he took the life of my father, 3 brothers and a sister, because my dad refused to do what he wanted. Grandpa's body was found at the bottom of the stairs the following day. The cause was put down as accidental death by the coroner. It seemed he had tripped at the top of the stairs and suffered a stroke in the fall. Grandma had reached out shortly after and was distraught by the senseless loss. Mom sold the farm, and we relocated for a fresh start. A couple of years later, my grandma passed away, leaving the family fortune in a trust fund for her grandchildren, and made my mom the trustee. After learning the truth, I felt I had closure, and we cried as we remembered that night again. The pain will never go away, and losing my dad had left a hole in my life. For a few years, when getting ready for bed, I would randomly hear an echo of my father's voice reading bedtime stories. I know it was grief, and remembering his voice brought relief of some sort. His voice was comforting and soothing and painful at the same time, as if someone was twisting my heartstrings. With time, the pain did lessen, and I did start to forget his face, and my memory of his voice had also faded. My heart still aches when I think of my siblings, and the chance to live their lives to the fullest was taken away. Yes, it was all senseless. Now, I am not an outdoorsy person, but a few years ago, my college friends, Mike and Sean, had convinced me to go hiking with them in the national park. We had finished college and were moving on to different states for work or to settle down with the family. I was heading off to New York for my internship in a law firm. Mike was doing his master's in computer science in Georgia, and Sean was heading back home to Florida with his pregnant wife. We have known each other for over 10 years, since boarding school, and now we were going our separate ways. We set off on Thursday morning, planning to complete the hike by Sunday afternoon. After parking the Jeep, we unloaded our gears and raced each other up the trail along the river. At night, we set up camp and cooled off in the river, told stories by the campfire, and reminisced about our time in boarding school and the mischiefs we got up to. Sean was the player, the ladies' man, and somehow was the first to get married and soon to be a father. The next few days went in a blink of an eye. We pranked each other, enjoyed the gorgeous landscape and fresh air. Sunday morning, we packed up and got ready to hike the final 4 hours back to the Jeep. Mike was messing around and winding us up with childish pranks. At one point, he tickled Sean's ear with a branch, making him flinch and duck, thinking it was a bug. They were both at each other's throat, and no one noticed the black bear emerging from behind a tree. I shushed them and pointed at the bear. It was rubbing its back against the tree, and we were amazed it had not noticed us yet. Mike whispered, "Do you guys have your bear sprays? Back away slowly." Someone stepped on a branch, which cracked loudly. The bear turned to look at us and landed back on its 4 legs and made a low growl. Mike mumbled something intelligible and pointed the bear spray towards it and sprayed before it could charge. The bear was stunned and started shaking its head. Mike whispered, "Run." We turned and ran as fast as we could. We ran for 15-20 minutes without stopping until we were out of breath. Panting, we stopped and looked around to check if the bear was on our tail. Sean was nowhere to be seen. Mike and I looked at each other and we were lost for words. We looked at the trail, expecting Sean to show up at any moment. Mike said, "I hope he is getting back at me for pranking him the last few days." It was 1 in the afternoon. The sun was high, and the heat coming off the ground was stifling. We stood under the shade of a tree and looked at the map. We were about 2 hours' hike from the car. Mike suggested retracing our step and find Sean. We had the bear spray if we came across the bear again. We walked back to where we had spotted the bear. It was gone, and so was Sean. We quietly looked around for any indication that Sean was attacked. There was no blood, no pieces of ripped clothing or his gear. He just vanished into thin air. We called the park rangers and explained the situation. They asked us to go back to our car, and they were going to put a team together to look for Sean. By the time the park ranger came, it was 3 in the afternoon. We showed them on the map where we had seen the bear and Sean. They searched for him well into the night. They decided to carry on the search again at dawn. We spent the night in the Jeep and contacted friends and family to come help in the search. Sean's wife, Alice, was distraught. She was 8 months pregnant with twins and on bed rest. We promised to keep her updated on the search. At break of dawn, the rangers were getting ready to go back out again, and they brought search dogs as well. They drew a search grid around the area we lost Sean and assigned each team an area to search. It was past noon when we heard the search dog had picked up a scent. The dog was circling a hole in the ground at the base of a tree, hidden by its large roots. The hole was deep, and if Sean had fallen into it, he was unlikely to have survived. They dropped some glow sticks in and saw Sean lying inert on a ledge about 6 feet down. The cave was roughly 20 feet deep. He was rescued and airlifted to the hospital. Sean had a broken neck and dislocated shoulder. It was a long road to recovery, both physically and mentally. He told us how he ended up falling into that cave. After Mike sprayed the bear, we all turned and started running. He was right behind us, running at full speed, and when he turned to check if the bear was chasing us, he lost balance and toppled over. With the weight of his backpack pulling him down, he found himself being dragged down the slope, unable to stop the fall. He hit the tree trunk hard and lost consciousness. When he woke up, it was pitch black and cold. He was in and out of consciousness until he was rescued. This was a freak accident, and one that could have ended very badly. Sean got to hold his twins, Matthew and Samuel, and had lived to tell the tale. It was an unforgettable hike for all the wrong reasons. I have very fond memories of my childhood. My parents were very affectionate and attentive with all 3 of us. I have an older brother, Jack, an older sister, Kim, and I am the youngest. My parents gave us the speeches about stranger danger, birds and bees, and so on and so forth. My friends and I, we would ride our bikes in a rocky terrain in the forest by the lake. We usually saw the old man that lived in an old crumbling house on the other side of the lake. He would sometimes watch us and wave before going back into the house. He never spoke to us, and no one knew anything about him. One day, my bike got a flat on my way home. I was walking with my bike when a car stopped next to me. It was the old man. I was taken aback and surprised that the old man had a car. I am not sure what I thought at that time, but given how in disrepair his house was in, I did not think he owned a car or could afford one. He asked in a gruff voice,
"Do you need a ride home, boy?"
There was about 20 minutes walk left, and I was not comfortable accepting a lift from him. I remember my parents' warnings. they drilled into us since I was 4 years old. He scoffed and said,
What do you think I am going to do? I don't bite.
He looked well offended. Just then, my friend Rick came flying down the road on his bike and stopped next to me. He asked me if everything was all right. I nodded and told the old man, Thanks, but I am fine. Thank you. He shrugged and drove away quickly. We were planning on having a sleepover that night, and Rick's timing was perfect. Rick and I walked home, chatting about this and that. We played video games till midnight, and finally went to bed when we could barely keep our eyes open. A few hours later, we were woken up by my brother screaming and chasing someone in the yard. When he came into the house, he said he saw someone standing outside my bedroom window and was trying to open it. He was coming home from a late shift at the restaurant when he saw someone outside my bedroom window. My dad called the police and asked my brother if he recognized who the man was. It was too dark, and he was not able to give any description at all. The police officers found footprints outside the windows and scratch marks on the window where he had tried to pry it open with a crowbar. They never found out who it was, and my dad had installed security cameras around the property the next day. A few years ago, I had already left home and was at uni when Rick emailed me a news article. The article was about a cannibal responsible for the disappearance of kids and teenagers in the local area where I grew up. The article had a picture, and it was the same old man who lived in the dilapidated house by the lake. Even after 8 years, he still looked the same. After a kid he had kidnapped had managed to escape, he was arrested and authorities found human remains in the walls of his house, buried around the property and even in his oven. He admitted that he had developed a taste for human flesh, and the younger the tastier. 5 of the bodies were identified from dental records, but there were more than 20 remains unidentified, and some of the bones were several decades old. I shudder at the thought of what he had planned for me, the day he had offered me a lift in his car. Though they had never found out who was outside my bedroom window that same night, I am now wondering if it was him, and grateful my brother came home when he did. And there you have it, the bone-chilling conclusions to 3 horrifying tales that will haunt your dreams for nights to come. But before we part ways, remember to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell to stay updated on all our terrifying content. If you dare to brave more nightmares, check out our other videos, where darkness reigns and fear lurks around every corner. Until next time, may your nights be sleepless and your screams never ending.